The London Plan identifies priorities for planning obligations, and this is coming on to Hugh's point, to be reflected in the Council's LDF. How should these broad strategic priorities be more specifically applied to the local circumstances and distinct city development challenges in Westminster? And perhaps if Sarah could just clarify what those priorities are in the London Plan.
Okay, I've just put up on the slide the actual London Plan policy as amended by the most recent alterations in connection with funding of Crossrail, just so that's there for reference for you. It highlights that the key priorities are affordable housing, and the alterations indicate supporting of the funding of Crossrail, where appropriate, and other public transport improvements. They also highlight tackling climate change, learning and skills, health facilities and services, and childcare provisions.
Okay, was there anybody wanting to make a comment against that?
Keith Hearn, CB Richard Ellis. Yes, I think the answer to the question is that clearly there are times when local priorities in the Westminster context must clearly take precedence over those of the London Plan. And I'm thinking in particular of one example which I know went before the committee sometime recently regarding Leicester Square, where quite properly the committee took the view that the priority in respect of that development was for public realm improvement over and above what would ordinarily be a requirement for affordable housing.
Okay. Crossrail obviously is going to be quite significant in terms of the proportion of funding that is looking for. Are there any comments about the relationship between that kind of funding and some of these smaller schemes that we currently look to fund through Section 106?
Area where, with the Crossrail, is there a limit to the area where it can be applied, or will it be right across Westminster? When there's a new major development, for example, in St James, could they get involved in paying a levy for Crossrail?
The answer to that question is the Mayor has chosen what is known as the wider Central Activities Zone boundary. This actually is much larger than the old Central Activities Zone boundary, which many of you will have got used to over the decades. And it's a boundary which effectively runs from Paddington, Special Policy Area, effectively south of the Marylebone Road, and then to where you're sitting now, Victoria. So yes, it includes the whole of St James's, most of the Royal Parks as well. So it has a very large impact, and it goes into the whole of the City of London and adjacent areas of Camden, Lambeth, Southwark and Islington. And this is the Mayor's proposal, but he's already using the draft policy to exercise his decision-making powers on applications that are referred to him. So yes, and it would last until 2026 by the Mayor's reckoning.
Just following on from Graham's point, I think in terms of Crossrail and from a development perspective, I think obviously it's in draft policy at the moment and it's gaining traction in terms of the contributions that are being sought. I think our concern going forwards would be, again, picking up on and reinforcing Hugh's comment that obviously I think it's the priorities of the whole Section 106 contribution pot, and that obviously Crossrail is going to take a lot more of that out of your kind of pot in the end. In regards to what policy's made, they'll be looking for the full £213 square foot on an increase like for like. So I think from our perspective as a developer, we'd like to understand with your emerging UDP, what are Westminster going to be looking for? How are they going to prioritise that? And especially with regards to the other areas within Westminster for opportunity zones, etc.
The Council has, since 2008, had a document called a Supplementary Planning Guidance on Section 106, which sets out our approach to all of those issues across the whole of the city. It includes 3 area-based maps at the rear of the document, which sets out a degree of detail, for example, on public realm issues, but also on issues such as social and community considerations, employment and training, and other matters. It does mention affordable housing, but I would just mention, for the avoidance of doubt, that we regard the provision of affordable housing not as a planning obligation or a benefit, but as a direct result of our policy. We secure it by a legal agreement, but it is not seen as a benefit. It is something that is actioned by the policy directly. The document we have is being reviewed at the moment. We're reviewing it not least because of what's on the screen in front of you and the impact some of you already referred to from what the Mayor is proposing, but also because of other matters which perhaps we'll touch on later, where the government have announced various forms of reviews or changes. In fact, Richard Dickinson mentioned some of these in terms of the community infrastructure levy. So we will have a revision, as well as the information you're contributing to tonight on the emerging LDOF documents. We'll have a revision to our supplementary guidance for discussion in the context of this further emerging work from the central government on community infrastructure levy, and indeed how the Mayor's draft policy fares at examination in public later this year. And we're happy to accept, as we always have been, comments and suggestions on the Council's policies, which do vary across the city. The justification for that is set out in the 2-volume SPG, which I'm happy to talk to people in more detail later on.
So I think as well, I mean, if we, I mean, whether or not we'll be looking from you, whether or not you support those as a starting point, and whether or not we would just adjust that on a case-by-case basis, or whether you feel that there's particular areas or particular priorities for Westminster that mean that that order of things as it's currently laid out is perhaps less important in Westminster, and that there are other priorities, or there should be a rejigging of those the Mayor's mayoral priorities, and there's good reasons for doing that within Westminster. I don't know whether you think that they are the appropriate order of priorities for Westminster or they're not.
Our approach would be that they're not always the appropriate priorities, and we would like to see robust local area planning briefs being used more in order to make sure that these are properly tailored to particular circumstances. For example, to pick a local one, the area around Victoria Station. Could be said that there are features of the priorities there that should be reordered or downgraded compared to others. Most people would say transport improvements are more important there in the context of, say, a redevelopment of the mainline station than affordable housing. There has been some good work on local area planning briefs, but we'd like to see more of it, please.
Okay, thank you. Right, were there any more comments against those priorities, the London Plan priorities, as they're set out?
Just a very quick question, really not, perhaps not to answer it, but to what extent might you be fettered by the general conformity test as you go forward in meeting the London Plan? I'm not going to ask for an answer tonight, but I'd be interested if we could debate that on another occasion, perhaps.
Thank you.